May 23rd, 1990, Ray Liotta stared into the camera and delivered the final line of Goodfellas.
Get to live the rest of my life like a schnook.
I'm an average nobody. I get to live the rest of my life like a schnook. The screen faded to black. The audience believed they just watched the true story of Henry Hill and the Lucchese crime family. They hadn't. They'd watched Martin Scorsese's masterpiece, brilliant, visceral, unforgettable. But it wasn't the truth. Not entirely. The helicopter scene never happened. Billy Bat's murder motive? Wrong. Tommy DeSimone's death? Hollywood got that wrong, too. Karen Hill? The movie made her a victim. In reality, she ran drug operations and knew about murders before they happened. The Lufthansa money? The film suggests it was spent. In truth, $5.8 million is still missing. The FBI is still looking for it. This is the story Goodfellas didn't tell you. The lies Hollywood needed to make a perfect movie. The truth, the courts, the FBI files, and the survivors revealed decades later. Every iconic scene, every brutal moment, every character you remember measured against what actually happened. This is Goodfellas versus reality. And the real story is darker, stranger, and more unbelievable than anything Scorsese put on screen. But here's the thing. Scorsese didn't lie to deceive you. He lied to make art. He compressed timelines. He invented characters. He changed motives. He turned 25 years of chaos into 2 hours of controlled perfection. And it worked. Goodfellas is one of the greatest films ever made. But if you want the truth, if you want to know what really happened to Henry Hill, Tommy DeSimone, Jimmy Burke, and the crew that pulled off the Lufthansa heist, then you need to hear what the movie left out. What the FBI discovered. What Henry Hill admitted years later when the lies stopped working. This is that story. Let's start with the opening. The movie begins with Henry, Jimmy, and Tommy driving through the night. They hear a noise from the trunk. They pull over. They open it. Billy Bat's bloodied, half-dead lunges at them. Tommy stabs him. Jimmy shoots him. They bury him in the woods. It's one of the most iconic sequences in cinema. But the movie doesn't tell you why they killed Billy Batts. It makes it look like Tommy killed him over an insult.
I'm breaking your balls a little bit, that's all. Now go home and get your fucking shine box.
Go home and get your shine box. That's the line that started it. But that's not why Billy Batts died. The real reason was territory. Billy Batts' William Benvina was a made man in the Gambino family. He'd just been released from prison in 1970. He came back to Brooklyn, expecting his old rackets to still be his. They weren't. While Batts was inside, Paul Vario's crew, including Tommy DeSimone, had taken over those operations. Loan sharking, bookmaking, extortion. When Batts came back and demanded his cut, it wasn't just disrespectful. It was a threat. Tommy DeSimone wasn't just a hothead. He was protecting his boss's territory. And Batts made a fatal mistake. He insulted Tommy in front of the crew, publicly. Go home and get your shine box. In the Mafia, public disrespect is a death sentence, not because of ego, because it challenges authority. If Tommy doesn't respond, he looks weak. If he looks weak, the crew looks weak. And if the crew looks weak, they lose power. So Tommy killed him. But here's what the movie doesn't show. Billy Batts wasn't killed at a small dinner. He was killed at a party with dozens of people, at a bar called The Suite in Queens. And Tommy didn't kill him alone. Angelo Sepe, a Lucchese associate who's never mentioned in Goodfellas, was there. So was Danny Rizzo. They beat Batts unconscious, dragged him out the back, and threw him in the trunk of Henry's car. Henry drove. Tommy and Angelo sat in the back, listening. And when they heard noises from the trunk 4 hours later, they pulled over. But Batts wasn't dead. He was still alive, barely, so Tommy stabbed him multiple times. Then Jimmy Burke, who the movie shows arriving later, was actually there the whole time. He shot Batts in the head. They buried him in a shallow grave in upstate New York. The movie got the brutality right. But It sanitized the logistics, and it erased Angelo Sepe completely. Now let's talk about Tommy DeSimone's death. In Goodfellas, Tommy gets whacked because he killed Billy Batts. The Gambinos find out. They lure him to a house in Queens with the promise he's about to be made. He walks in. He realizes it's a setup. The door closes. Gunshots. That's the story. Clean, karmic. Tommy killed a made man. So the Mafia killed Tommy. But that's not what happened. Tommy DeSimone wasn't killed for Billy Batts. He was killed for murdering Ronald Girothi. You've never heard that name because Goodfellas never mentions it. Ronald Foxy Girothi was in the Gambino family. In 1979, Tommy DeSimone and Angelo killed him during a drug dispute. Henry Hill didn't even know about it until years later. But the Gambinos knew. And killing a made man without permission from the commission is an automatic death sentence. There's no trial, no appeal, you die. So in January 1979, the Gambinos called Tommy in. They told him he was getting made. He believed it. He walked into a house in Howard Beach. John Gotti was there. So was Anthony Rampino. They shot Tommy in the back of the head. His body was never found. The movie says it was revenge for Billy Batts. The truth is, it was revenge for Foxy Girothi. The movie made it simple. Reality was more complicated. And here's the twist. Paul Vario, the capo who mentored Tommy, knew the hit was coming. He didn't stop it. He couldn't. If he tried to protect Tommy, the Gambinos would have come after him too. So he let Tommy walk into that house. That's the real omerta. Not silence. Strategic sacrifice. The movie never shows that calculation. Let's talk about the helicopter scene. It's one of the most celebrated sequences in the film. Henry Hill, paranoid, coked out, driving across Queens with a trunk full of guns and drugs. He keeps looking up at the sky. A helicopter is following him. It's everywhere. He pulls over. The helicopter's still there. He speeds up. The helicopter follows. Then the FBI raids his house. Henry gets arrested. The helicopter, the audience assumes, was federal surveillance. Here's the problem. There was no helicopter. Henry Hill admitted this in multiple interviews. The DEA and the FBI confirmed it. On the day of Henry's arrest, May 16, 1980, there was no helicopter tracking him. Henry was high on cocaine. He was paranoid. He imagined the helicopter. Scorsese included it because it was a perfect visual metaphor for Henry's paranoia. But it wasn't real. The feds were following Henry. They had surveillance. They had informants. They had phone taps. But they weren't using a helicopter. They didn't need to. Henry was so reckless by 1980 that he was driving around Queens with his brother Michael, picking up drug shipments, visiting his mistress, and cooking cocaine in his mother's house. All in one day. The FBI just waited for him to make a mistake. He did. They arrested him at his home in Rockville Center. No helicopter, just a dozen agents and a warrant. The movie made it cinematic. Reality was bureaucratic, but Scorsese made the right choice. The helicopter scene is unforgettable. The truth, Henry getting arrested in his driveway while neighbors watched, is not. Now let's talk about Karen Hill. In Goodfellas, Karen is portrayed as a naive Jewish girl who falls in love with a mobster and slowly realizes what she's gotten into. She's horrified by the violence. She's disgusted by the mistresses. She's a victim of Henry's world. That's the movie. The reality is different. Karen Hill knew exactly what Henry was doing, from the beginning. She wasn't naive. She was complicit. Karen handled money. She stashed drugs. She delivered messages. She knew about the Lufthansa heist before it happened. She knew Henry was involved in murders. And she didn't just tolerate it. She benefited from it. Karen Hill lived in a 5-bedroom house in Long Island. She wore fur coats. She drove a Cadillac. She sent her kids to private school. She wasn't some innocent bystander. She was a mob wife. And mob wives don't survive by asking questions. They survive by keeping their mouths shut and enjoying the money. In 1980, when Henry got arrested, Karen could have walked away. She didn't. She agreed to enter witness protection with him, not because she was loyal, because she knew she was implicated. The FBI had evidence that Karen had helped Henry move cocaine. She had delivered packages. She had accepted drug money. If she didn't cooperate, she was going to prison too. So she flipped. But here's what the movie doesn't show. Karen hated witness protection. She hated the fake names, the relocations, the middle-class anonymity. In 1989, she divorced Henry. She took the kids and left. She changed her name and disappeared. For decades, no one knew where she was. In 2004, she published a memoir. She described Henry as a liar, a cheat, and a terrible father. She admitted she knew about the crimes. She admitted she laundered money. And she said she'd do it all again because the money was worth it. That's not the Karen in Goodfellas. That's the real Karen Hill. And Scorsese couldn't put that in the movie because it would have made her unsympathetic. And Lorraine Bracco's performance needed the audience to root for her. So Scorsese rewrote her. He turned a co-conspirator into a tragic wife. It worked for the film, but it wasn't the truth. Let's talk about the Lufthansa heist. The movie shows the planning, the execution, and the aftermath. It's meticulously detailed. But it leaves out the most important part, the money. $6 million in cash and jewelry. The biggest robbery in American history at the time. The movie shows the crew celebrating. Then Jimmy Burke starts killing everyone. Stax Edwards, Martin Krugman, Louis and Joanna Kafura, Teresa Ferrara, Tommy DeSimone. The bodies pile up. But the movie never tells you what happened to the money. Here's the truth. Most of it vanished. The FBI recovered $20,000. That's it, 0.3% of the total. The rest? Gone. Henry Hill claimed Jimmy Burke buried it in upstate New York, in Florida, in his backyard in Queens. But no one ever found it. The FBI dug up Burke's property in 1986. They found nothing. They dug again in 2013. Still nothing. Some of the money was spent. Burke bought property in Florida. He bought a horse farm. He sent his kids to private school. But that accounts for maybe $500,000. Maybe. The rest, $5.3 million, is unaccounted for. The FBI's theory is that Burke laundered it through offshore accounts, shell companies in the Cayman Islands, investments in real estate under fake names. But they could never prove it. And when Burke died in prison in 1996, he took the secret with him. The money is still out there, somewhere, and the movie just ignores that. Because explaining money laundering isn't cinematic. But hunting for $5 million in buried cash? That would have been a great sequel. Let's talk about Stax Edwards. In the movie, Stax is a low-level associate played by Samuel L. Jackson. He's supposed to dump the getaway van after the Lufthansa heist. He gets high instead. He falls asleep. The cops find the van parked in front of his girlfriend's apartment. Jimmy Burke sends Tommy DeSimone to kill him. Tommy shoots Stax 6 times while he's in bed. It's brutal. It's quick. It's presented as Burke cleaning up loose ends. But that's not why Stax Edwards died. Stax Edwards was killed because he talked, not to the cops, to his friends. Stax was a musician. He played in blues clubs in Queens. He knew people outside the mob, and after the Lufthansa heist, he started bragging. He told his girlfriend. He told his bandmates. He told people at bars that he'd been part of the biggest robbery in history, and word got back to Jimmy Burke. In the Mafia, talking is worse than incompetence. You can forgive a mistake. You can't forgive betrayal. Stax Edwards was killed on December 18th, 1978, 7 days after the heist. The van wasn't even found yet. But Burke already knew Stax was a liability. So he sent Tommy DeSimone and Angelo Seppi to kill him. They knocked on the door. Stax let them in. He thought they were friends. Tommy shot him 6 times. Once in the face, 5 times in the chest. The movie makes it look like Stax died for being lazy. The truth is, He died for talking, and that's a much darker lesson. In the mob, incompetence gets you demoted, betrayal gets you killed. The movie softened that. Reality didn't. Now let's talk about the Christmas party scene. It's one of the most iconic moments in Goodfellas. The crew is celebrating. Everyone's getting envelopes of cash. Wives are showing off jewelry. Jimmy Burke is smiling, but the camera lingers on his face, and you can see it. The calculation, the paranoia. Burke is already planning who has to die. The movie uses this scene to show Burke's mindset. Everyone who touched the Lufthansa money is a potential witness, so they all have to go. But here's what the movie doesn't tell you. That Christmas party never happened, not the way Scorsese filmed it. Henry Hill admitted in interviews that there was no single party where everyone gathered. The crew celebrated separately, small groups, different locations, different nights. Burke didn't hand out cash in front of everyone. He paid people individually, in private. Away from witnesses. The Christmas party scene is a narrative invention. Scorsese created it because he needed a visual way to show the crew together before they started dying, and it worked. It's one of the most memorable scenes in the film, but it's fiction. The murders were real. The party was not. And that's the difference between cinema and documentary. Scorsese chose drama over accuracy, and the movie is better for it. But the truth is stranger, because Jimmy Burke didn't kill people out of paranoia. He killed them out of strategy. He didn't murder 9 people because he was scared. He murdered 9 people because he was smart. Every person he killed was either talking too much, spending too much, or knew too much. Stax Edwards talked. Martin Krugman talked. Louis Cafora spent too much. Teresa Ferrara, FBI informant. Burke wasn't paranoid. He was disciplined, and the movie makes him look erratic. The truth is, he was terrifyingly rational. Let's talk about Paul Vario. In Goodfellas, Paul Vario, called Paulie Cicero in the film, is portrayed as a mid-level capo. He runs a cab stand in Brooklyn. He earns from hijacking, loan sharking, and gambling. He's powerful, but small time. The movie makes him seem like a neighborhood boss, a guy who controls a few blocks and a handful of crews. That's not who Paul Vario was. Paul Vario was one of the most powerful capos in the Lucchese crime family. He didn't just control a cab stand. He controlled John F. Kennedy Airport for 40 years. Vario's crew stole cargo from every airline that flew into JFK. They hijacked trucks. They bribed workers. They controlled the unions. They had access to everything that came through that airport. Cigarettes, electronics, jewelry, cash. Vario's operation generated hundreds of millions of dollars over 4 decades. The Lufthansa heist, that was just one score. Vario's crew was pulling hijackings every week. And Vario wasn't just a gangster. He was a businessman. He owned legitimate companies. He had political connections. He paid off cops, judges, union leaders. He was untouchable, until Henry Hill testified against him. In 1981, Vario was convicted of racketeering and sentenced to 10 years in federal prison. He died behind bars in 1988. But here's what the movie doesn't show. Vario never broke. He never cooperated. He never flipped. He went to prison and took the code seriously. Meanwhile, his protege Henry Hill became the most famous rat in Mafia history. That contrast is the real story. Vario embodied old-school omertà. Henry embodied the new era where loyalty was negotiable, and Goodfellas barely explores that. Let's talk about Janice Rossi. In the movie, Janice is Henry's mistress. She's blonde, glamorous, fun. She represents the seductive side of mob life. Henry sets her up in an apartment. Karen finds out. There's a confrontation. Then Janice just disappears from the movie. No explanation, no follow-up. She's erased. Here's why. Janice Rossi wasn't a real person. She was a composite character. The real mistress was a woman named Linda. Henry never used her last name in interviews. For decades, no one knew who she was. She never testified. She never entered witness protection. She never wrote a book. She just vanished. And here's the thing. Linda knew everything. She knew about the Lufthansa heist. She knew about the murders. She knew about the drug operation. She was with Henry during the most violent period of his life. And when Henry flipped in 1980, the FBI didn't protect her. They didn't offer her witness protection. They didn't relocate her. They just left her. Henry testified. Karen testified. And Linda disappeared. For all we know, she's still alive, living under a different name, somewhere in America. Or maybe Jimmy Burke had her killed. Maybe she's one of the unsolved disappearances connected to the Lufthansa aftermath. We don't know, because no one ever investigated, and the movie doesn't even acknowledge it. Scorsese erased her from the story, not because she wasn't important, but because her story didn't have an ending. And movies need endings. Reality doesn't always provide them. Now let's talk about the ending. Goodfellas ends with Henry Hill in witness protection. He's bored. He's miserable. He's living in a suburban house, cooking spaghetti sauce, living like a schnook. The movie ends on a melancholy note. Henry traded power and excitement for safety and mediocrity. It's poetic. It's tragic. It's a perfect ending. But it's not what happened. Henry Hill didn't adjust to witness protection. He self-destructed. Within 7 years, he was kicked out of the program. Why? Because he couldn't stop committing crimes. In 1987, Henry was arrested for cocaine trafficking, again, in Seattle. While in witness protection, the FBI had relocated him, given him a new identity, and paid him a monthly stipend. And he used that money to start dealing drugs again. He was convicted and sentenced to 5 years. The FBI dropped him from the program. After that, Henry's life spiraled. He was arrested for drunk driving multiple times. He was arrested for assault. He was arrested for methamphetamine possession. He violated parole. He got arrested again. Between 1990 and 2012, Henry Hill was arrested 25 times. He was broke. He was divorced. He was estranged from his kids. He lived in Los Angeles, selling paintings on eBay and doing interviews about Goodfellas for a few $100s. He died in 2012. Heart attack. 69 years old. Alone in a hospital. That's the real ending. Not poetic, not tragic, just sad. The movie ends with Henry alive, safe, and bored. The truth is, Henry died broke, addicted, and forgotten. And Scorsese made the right choice. Because the real ending isn't satisfying. It's just depressing. The movie gave Henry a fate worse than death mediocrity. Reality gave him something worse irrelevance. So here's the question. If Goodfellas got so much wrong, why is it still considered one of the greatest films ever made? Because great art isn't about accuracy. It's about truth. Not factual truth. Emotional truth. Scorsese didn't care if the helicopter was real. He cared that the paranoia was real. He didn't care if the Christmas party happened. He cared that the betrayal was real. He didn't care if Billy Batts died over an insult or a territorial dispute. He cared that the violence was sudden, brutal, and irreversible. Goodfellas isn't a documentary. It's a morality play. It's about the seduction of power and the inevitability of consequence. It's about men who chose a life of crime and paid for it. Some died. Some went to prison. Some became rats. And the one who survived, he lived the rest of his life like a schnook. That's the truth Scorsese was after. And he nailed it. But if you want the other truth, the factual truth, you have to look at the court transcripts, the FBI files, the wiretaps, the testimony. The interviews Henry gave when he was old and broke and didn't care about protecting anyone anymore. And what you find is this. The Mafia wasn't a brotherhood. It was a business. And the only rule that mattered was survival. Tommy DeVito killed a made man and got killed. Jimmy Burke killed 9 people and died in prison. Paul Vario stayed loyal and died behind bars. Henry Hill betrayed everyone and lived. And the money? The $5.8 million from the Lufthansa heist? It's still out there, somewhere. Maybe buried in upstate New York, maybe sitting in an offshore account, maybe split among the families of the dead. We'll never know, because the only people who knew are dead or lying. So what's the lesson here? Goodfellas is a masterpiece, one of the greatest crime films ever made. But it's not a documentary. It's not a textbook. It's a story. A damn good one. And if you want to understand what really happened to Henry Hill, Jimmy Burke, Tommy DeVito, and the Lucchese family, you need to go beyond the movie. You need to read the FBI files. Listen to the wiretaps. Study the trial transcripts. Interview the survivors. And even then, you'll only get part of the truth. Because the Mafia was built on lies. And lies, once told, become history. The movie lied to make art. The mobsters lied to stay alive. And Henry Hill, he lied because that's all he knew how to do. The truth about Goodfellas is that there is no single truth. There's the movie version, there's the FBI version, there's Henry's version, and somewhere in between is what actually happened. This video gave you the facts, the court records, the evidence, the things Scorsese left out. But even this isn't the whole story. Because the whole story died with Jimmy Burke, Tommy DeVito, and Paul Vario. And the only man who could have told it, Henry Hill, spent 50 years changing his story every time someone paid him. So watch Goodfellas. Enjoy it. It's a masterpiece. But don't mistake it for history. It's Hollywood. And Hollywood always lies. The only question is whether the lie is beautiful enough to matter. In this case, it is. If this story fascinated you, hit subscribe. We drop a new mob documentary every week. Drop a comment. What other Mafia film should we fact-check next? Casino? The Irishman? Donnie Brasco? Let us know. This is Mafia Talks, untold stories from the world of organized crime.